It's the 8th day of December 2021. Hope everybody's doing good. Forgot to turn the Geiger counter on, did I? I'll get it in a second. Ooh, so we got 736 pictures released in January of this year from the nuclear industry via TEPCO. The nuclear industry worldwide is just one great big cult. They're all connected. They all support each other. And so 736 pictures were released. Now I'm going to show you a couple of hundred, and they're zooms where I zoomed in. And these were all taken with drones. And one thing you're going to notice about the 776 pictures from the original meltdown, from when it originally happened, released 10 years later, is that all the pictures are redacted. 736 pictures, and they're all redacted. And what I mean by that is you can see the pixelation. You can see the pixels, like the little squares, the blot out. So this would be reactor 2. Over there is reactor 1. Behind me is reactor 3. But as you can see, they got everything pixelated out. And so, of course, that raises the question, why? Just give me a second, I flick on the camera. That's close enough. It's the Geiger counter up on your right-hand side. Anyway, let me expand that a little tiny bit. There you go. 290 counts per minute. So that's reactor 2 over there, and this would be reactor 3. And so what's going on is these are new pictures released this year, but once again, everything is redacted. And so this was a warning, I would imagine. And what I'm going to bring into the conversation is pictures after. Well, that's reactor 3. And this is a decade later, where they claim it looks like that. I went there myself and checked it out. Not. And so what they're trying to do is convince people. Here's another picture, reactor 3. So they brought this in with cranes and they built structure around reactor 3. So they got at reactor 3 after the nuclear meltdown. That's what was left of it. Let me give you a shot of that right quick before we get going here. So that's reactor 3. And this is reactor 3. So this is the original footage. And the first thing you do, you would expect 10 years later to get unredacted pictures, not redacted pictures. So I don't know if it was a lawsuit or freedom of information that got released. Of course, this is supposed to be 190 feet high. The reactors in Japan were the biggest in the world, 800 tons. And Chernobyl was 200 tons, but it was mostly graphite which is not pure uranium and pure plutonium like these reactors are. Because they create thousands of different types of isotopes, pure uranium, pure plutonium. And so the drone, there was a lot of footage, was different parts of the site is important, but it's not the story tonight. And so this is drone footage, and surprisingly, as you zoom in, and originally I was kind of shocked. I was like, I found this little picture here, and I zoomed back and forth on it. But when you zoom out on it, everything behind it is redacted. But that was a 190-foot building. So if you owned a 190-foot building and you were on vacation, you got a text message that you had some damage to your building, your 19-story building, and they text you a picture, you open the picture up, and this is what you look at. Are you going to say it's a little damage, or are you going to say, my God, was anybody killed? Was there anybody alive? You know, I hope the insurance is going to pay for a new building because that's gone. And so what did the nuclear industry do? They pretended everything was okay and pretended it looked like that over there. And when they tore the guts off reactor 4, this is what was left. And so you can see the interior hanging out. It's so lethal. These are all cranes, remote control. And what looks like a pool up there is actually an elevator shaft. And let me articulate a couple more pieces of this for you so you can appreciate what's going on here. That's the top of the reactor. On top of it is the bottom of the reactor, and alongside of it is the top of the inside of the reactor. Inside the reactor is the bottom, and then the yellow cap, you can kind of see the bolts. These huge 2-foot, 3-foot bolts go all around it. Or actually, they're much bigger. That's around 300,000 pounds or something. And it's supposed to be up another 100 feet in the air. And so the original footage... the original footage was released this year, and everything is redacted. Now, one would assume that's some kind of warning for everybody, for the planet. This is the strangest pictures imaginable. This is reactor 2, but everything is redacted. That's reactor 1, and everything around it is redacted. Now, up there is reactor 4. And, reactor 4, they went overboard on the redaction of common spent fuel pool. This is reactor 4. Behind me would be reactor 3. Up there is the common spent fuel pool. There's 6 reactors on this site, the world's biggest. And they've been there for about 40 years. And every 16, 18 months, they're going to change 1/3 to 1/2 or more of their fuel. And they can't store it all at the top of the building. So they have another fuel pool to take stuff that they can move. And because they're not going to move it very far, and they put it in another pool. Now it boils off 120,000 liters a day in each pool. There's 2 pools at the top of each buildings. There's 6 buildings. There's 12 pools. And then the common spent fuel pool can hold around 10 million pounds. It's like when you compare it to Chernobyl, it's hard to compare it to Chernobyl because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium instead of mostly graphite. Okay, so the common spent fuel pool is at ground level, and it's completely redacted. And you can see it's completely blotted out, heavily blotted out on the top part of the building. So the reason you would do something like that is emissions, I guess. And I was looking at it, and when you zoom in, they're actually transport truck containers all piled up in the back there. Big pile of them slammed together because there's like a pinch point back there where the wave came in and it went up and then it came back. Now there's multiple waves came into the coastline. These things are right on the coastline. They're up elevated, but this wave at some places had been over 100 feet high. Like in some places where it went into areas, other waves came in on top of it at 400 or 500 miles per hour. So the first wave slows down because it's meeting all the resistance. The next wave comes in, piggybacks off of that. Behind it is another, because you're talking about 175 miles of the tectonic plates had let go. That's the only way you're going to have a tsunami, like a big tsunami, is you need a displacement. Other ways, of course, are mountains shear off into the ocean, or even mountains under the ocean shear off and displace. But generally, big ones like this are emblematic of a tectonic plate. And they don't like talking about that because they want to keep you in fear every time you hear the word earthquake, which are natural, right? And Japan built all the reactors on the worst possible spots with the worst possible design where they had decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings. So about 10 million pounds is what they can put in these pools. But because they don't have a repository anywhere in Japan or anywhere else, it's double or triple. And which means, and this is in farm country too, you know, typical nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms right up to the side of the buildings, farmland. Because the radiation lands there, the fuel pools are always hemorrhaging. They're still splitting the atom, pulsing trillions of atoms into the environment through evaporation in the water, which is also a moderator, which is borated water to stop a chain reaction with special waters. And they have to replenish that 120,000 liters every day. They're hard cases. It's the whole legacy of the industry is predicated upon deceptions, lies, misrepresentations, deceit, criminal activities, 100%. These common spent fuel pools is really troubling. That's a really troubling thing because you've got multiple reactors. Cover up is obvious. But the spent fuel pool, we didn't know that till these pictures were released. And once again, these pictures are from a drone. From the La drone. And there's no really good showing you this way because you can't see the scope of the reductions. Let me keep it up here. So this is a common spent fuel pool. I better get back in the show here. Common spent fuel pool over there and reactor 4 up there. Reactor 4. They claimed it looked like this on the inside of reactor 4 in 2013. A 2013 photo, members of the media, the worldwide media has perpetrated this hoax upon the planet that they're at the top of the building that actually doesn't even exist. I'll show you the rest of that. Yeah, I think it's stunning. We've never been able to catch them at their perpetual lies. I'm going to play this clip where
I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4.
Which is to the left, by the way. And where they're to is supposed to be at the top of the building, which the buildings are 190 feet high.
The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Okay, and so they're not at the top of the building to the left. And that's truly one of the most frightening things you're ever going to see, because no media worldwide has called them on it. No academics of any discipline worldwide has called them out on it. And there's an endless amount of people worldwide. All the media either portrayed it or published it. Like, say, you know how Associated Press or writers, how a lot of media will just regurgitate the same picture, the same paragraphs, the same authors at the same time worldwide. There's around 1,600 media for both of those distributors, which is the globalists themselves, obviously. So that's staggering. If Greenpeace said, hey, look, you know, if Greenpeace was to tweet out a screen capture of that and say, look, these guys are lying, they're not actually on top of the building to your left, it's a lethal dose and there is no fuel pool because it's gone. Can you imagine what would happen to the nuclear industry within about 6 or 8 hours after that? So the media worldwide participated in this cover-up. This is 100% cover-up. Reactor 4 is really something, right? In fact, Fukushima, he said, I've seen a paper which says, this is top scientist, which says, bye-bye Japan and evacuate the west coast of North America if your coal plant breaks, if your gas plant breaks, if your oil plant breaks, or if your nuclear power plant breaks. You guessed it, the nuclear power plant. I'll play that clip for you because that's important, because it's gone. But why did they lie? Well, they lied because it's so bad. They don't want the nuclear industry to get their throats cut that morning.
3 out of the 4 plants were destroyed in the earthquake and in the tsunami. The 4th one has been so badly damaged that the fear is if there's another earthquake of a 7 or above, that building will go, and then all hell breaks loose. I have seen a paper which says that if, in fact, the 4th plant goes under an earthquake and those rods are exposed, it's bye-bye Japan, and everybody on the west coast of North America should evacuate. Now, if that isn't terrifying, I don't know what. Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine.
Oh my goodness. Dana Nasana says, hey Dana, you should unblock one of the YouTubers. Well, I blocked them for a reason. Now when they get you to do that, this is called divide and conquer. So they start turning, they make friends while they're here. The industry ingratiates itself into the conversation, into the comment section in increments over time. Becomes part of the local, right, so to speak. But I've been at this for a very long time, and there's certain things I don't tolerate. And that guy had crossed every one of them. Which is regurgitating the nuclear industry's narratives, which I spend a lifetime now debunking that, providing to work myself to death every day. And so the worst thing that can happen to me is when people pick sides, like Dana's got done to me there, and bless his heart. Hey Dana, you should unblock Obsolete Optics. No, I blocked that creature for a reason. I don't like blocking people. You really got to get under my skin repeatedly to get me to block you, or you got to be a troll. That's obvious, and I'll block you right away, move on. And so this is how they do it, though, right? They create... There was one guy, not that long ago, he was collecting emails. I caught him doing it. I got rid of him right away. Because they're going after you then. See, when you do that, you can't give away your emails and stuff like this. And then you find these people out on pro-nuclear blogs attacking me. So I've been at this a long time, and it always pains me when people do that. But I want to keep the comments section open, because I think everybody that's honest should have a place where they can have a voice. And this is why we run this show. We run this show 5 days a week. It's a brutal amount of work. It's absurd. So that the world knows this is still ongoing. This is a public service I do here to all people on the planet, all species. I'm not racist or bigoted or prejudiced or biased. And I don't have time to coddle everybody that comes to my site, because I'm basically preaching to the choir for the most part, and I'm providing the documentation to back up my assertions for policymakers and industries and people that have been brainwashed and misinformed for a long time. Find my site. I get this one opportunity to get their attention, and that one of these individuals is going to be in a position where they can blow this thing wide open. That's the theory, because if not, we're drifting at sea on a rocky coastline. So this is a candle for the lost ships on the ocean. It's not a lighthouse, it's a candle. Because that's all I can manage with all the censorship, and that I don't have the support that I need to build this empire to come out and bludgeon the industry. Like, I work myself sick, and it worries me sick when people pick sides against somebody they don't know nothing about. There's nothing I can do about it. That's the nature of this beast. And so I have a heavy heart all the time. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I woke up this morning and it was, we're going to have a storm tomorrow. And I had so much arthritis, I was thinking about going to the hospital and asking them to cut my legs off because they hurt so much. And finally, the day was going on, I couldn't do nothing about it. And so I still had to go out and get a tarp on the boat, which is 13 and a half feet up, not counting the radar, and they had to get up and pull the tarp over that and strap it all down, get underneath it, and get everything ready, because winter is going to show up here tomorrow with a great big boom. Minus 14, 30 centimeters of snow. And as we seen a couple of years ago, we had 18 feet of snow in this one season. My back still hurts. This is the common spent fuel pool that they got it completely redacted all the way across the road and all the other reactors. And they took down my site with 24,000 subscribers a couple of months ago. This video, I had it up on that site. And so I have to produce the video again and get it back out there, because this is important information. And it's cool because you get time to think about things after doing it the first time. I would have done this different, would have done that different. So that's reactor 4. That's the common spent fuel pool over there. I think it's stunning they done that. That's reactor 3 now coming into view, and up there is going to be reactor 2. Reactor 2 stayed intact. And so that's reactor 2. You can see the squareness. So this is the ocean side where I'm to on this side. You can see the damage from the debris where it washed way up there. Common spent fuel pool was only across the road, right? In that direction. And there was also, and that's reactor 1. Now, so they got everything here redacted, including those big stacks. So those stacks, that's for emissions. All nuclear power plants have incinerators at these places where they're legally allowed to burn radiation at a certain... There's no one to check them because it's a nuclear power plant. You can't even get close enough to it to take a picture without high school security guards confronting you that got weapons on their waist and are ready to use them. And so ultimate blackout, but I mean, my goodness, if you know, this is a 190-foot building, this was. There's so much heat, the detonation, the video of the detonation is massive. These buildings were meant to take a big detonation, they were built. Those pylons you'll see at some of those buildings, let me show you. Yeah, it's really something. Do you have it now? The video I done last night really shows you the radioactive fallout for Japan and a little bit for the worldwide, but mostly Japan, how incredibly terrible it actually is there. The people that are working on these in those redacted areas of the pictures, these are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. And there is no nuclear scientist there. There's no volunteers from a nuclear industry working there. That really tells the story. There's no nuclear power plants worldwide. Don't send their workers down there to help. The United Nations went to get water samples, and they went like 50 miles offshore to get their samples. And that should frighten you too. Here we go. This is better. Now, at the time, when those pictures were taken, it didn't look like this because they hadn't got a road cleared out yet. It was bad, right? 680 kilometers of the coastline. So when it's not redacted, this is what reactor 4 looked like. But they want you to believe it looks like that. And I can't because it looks like that. And here's another different side. Oh, I didn't bring it over. Sorry. So that's a different side. Now that's a 190-foot building. Each of those, let me show you. It's hard when I say 190-foot building, it's still hard when you're looking at this. You can turn an SUV, like a big one, around on those beams. That's how big the beams actually are. That you can easily turn a big 1-ton pickup truck around on those beams. And they're built to take that detonation as part of the infrastructures. So they gutted it almost all the way to the ground. They built this structure with cranes. They put these big panelings on. This is just one piece with cranes. And then the worldwide media came out and pretended that they were in the fuel pool and everything was hunky-dory. It's a lethal dose, and you can't make these buildings that are destroyed look like that because it's already destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore. But I mean, this is what they've done, right? So the original footage that was released this year of 736 pictures, not in the English media, by the way. This was in Chinese, and I always translate everything. And I was like, what is this? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And so I opened up I went to the link and opened up the different folders, and I was like, what the hell am I looking at? Because now these are all zoomed in. because the original pictures are not zoomed in. They're just drones, so it doesn't look anything like this. So when I zoom in and I see everything is redacted, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why is everything redacted? Because when you zoomed out, it doesn't look that way. I'll give you an example. Bear with me. I'll give you an example. So inside of that, at the very top of it up there, at the very, very top, if you're on the very top sat down, underneath you is supposed to look like this. These people are lunatics. That's how they deceived you, right? But I'm going to bring in some of the pictures just to give you a quick... Why doesn't that always... Who knows? There it is. Yeah, bring in 50 or something. We'll just flick through them right quick. Because if you don't zoom in, they don't mean nothing, see? Give it a chance to load there. Loading saw. Oh, there we go. All right. So I'll get out of the way and I'll talk you through this. So when you're looking at, well, you can see the redaction on the big screen, obviously, right? But on the little computer screen, you couldn't see it. I got a big screen in front of me. So you're flicking through these pictures and you're like, well, I don't know. And you start zooming in on it. And why is that redacted? That's redacted right there in the middle. Look at that. And this side too. Who knows? I'll have a look at that later on if I can find it. So they're headed on drone. So on a drone, it doesn't seem to really... Now you're coming back to the coastline. There's the reactors. The common spent fuel pool is right here. Reactor 4 is up there, and it goes all the way down to number 1, that direction. And then it struck me. I said, those pictures are redacted? Nah, why would you redact them? And then even a lot of pictures, they went out into the ocean. Out to the points anyway, right? Turn around and then come back in. And so the average person that downloads it and flicks through it, see, it looks totally what you would expect from a drone picture. And even here, it's hard to appreciate it that everything is redacted. But then all of a sudden, when you zoom in, this is the common spent fuel pools, and you can see all the containers from around this area got piled up in behind of it. And I said, wait a second, that's the reactors. Oh my God, why is everything redacted? So I went back and I zoomed in on every single picture. And I kept seeing everything redacted, including reactor 6 was redacted, far, far away. This was stunning. So that's reactor 2, it's half redacted. Reactor 1 in that picture is not redacted, but behind of it is. Because the common spent fuel pool got washed down that way. And you had reactor 3 and reactor 4 detonate. Reactor 1 detonated. And they ejected a lot of fuel, lethal doses of fuel in that area. Yeah, that's how they divide people. You say, well, I like Dana. I don't know why he blocked me. Trust me, I didn't do it because I was bored or because I'm a mean person. That person got every chance imaginable and proved that they're not fit to be here and that they have other intentions. Right? It causes a divide, see? And then so everybody watches the video will be sitting on a fence when I work hard to bring this documentation to them. It's okay to call me up and ask me, but what's the point of doing my show, right? Is to try to educate the population without the distraction. Hey, a bit of drama is good, I suppose, anyway. So you can see emissions clearly. There's emissions going on over there. You can see the buildings in the background are torn apart. And that's reactor 2 on the seaside. That's where the panel blew out. These are huge panels. Reactor 1, but reactor 2 right there is redacted. And this is released this year, 10 years later. All these redacted pictures. And we got lots of pictures after, right? That's reactor 4. Reactor 3. By the way, there's one of the detonations. That's reactor 3 detonating. And that's what was left of it. But you won't know that if you go to those pictures because everything is redacted. Yeah, the Great Divide is hard at work, but it'll set me back a ways. And so they built a sarcophagus, a temporary sarcophagus around reactor 1. That's reactor 1. They do this all with cranes, no people. Empty is using people and they will die that day or that week or that month for sure. It's probably a version you haven't seen. So they use cranes to lift in these panels. And the panels got hooks where they just latch right on by gravity. And then they come out and show you these pictures and claim that's what it looks like inside of the buildings. That one there is supposed to be reactor 4. And the problem was that now the idea of containing this is because the emissions were really bad around the site as it is. And you felt they can contain it and vent it up one of the stacks. But the problem is that when you do this, if you take a 2-foot piece of that and you bring it to a subway station, that's so radioactive, everybody walks past it for 1 million years will die. And this is why they put on these facades that it's 100 unbelievable deceit. So the whole nuclear industry has participated in this. Once again, there's no dissenting opinions from any other disciplines in the academic world. There was no universities saying, this is outrageous. There was no NGOs. There was Greenpeace, never opened his pie hole. Arnie Gunnarsson told you. It's like getting a crushed pack of cigarettes and trying to get a cigarette out. They're lunatics. It's emblematic, of course. It's social engineering that has now gone Looney Tunes. They've been doing this social engineering since TV existed. Right? And you see it in stuff like Superman, or I'm sorry, like the Hulk and Spider-Man were created directly by the nuclear industry, funded by the nuclear industry to get people, kids, to start. And this is long-term plans, right? So In increments over decades, you convince children as they're growing up that subconsciously, radiation might turn you into a superhero. And they turn these caricatures of radiation and they put them up on the big screens. The kids got Halloween costumes and Christmas blankets of these things and blah, blah, blah. It's very effective if you keep doing it. And this is what they've been doing for 75 years, this propaganda campaign. So generation after generation of people have to regurgitate the same lies. And we call them now the entitled lot. And so they tell a lie like it's just a script for them, see? It's just a script. That's reactor 4, I think, there, that hole. That's looks like reactor 3 in that one. That's reactor 2. Again, why is it all redacted? You can see the windows pummeled in all those buildings in the background. So these are zoom-in shots from a drone that were released this year after 10 years. It doesn't even look like they're redacted, does it? Well, on the back of reactor 2 it certainly is. And on the seaside you can see smoke emanating from the building. So now you're headed towards reactor 5 and 6. And this building here was between the reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the distance to reactor 5 and 6 is that way, is the cast storage, where the dry cast storage is stored in this building. And so the reactors are way up on that level, which meant this building would have been buried completely underwater. And it's designed to take a detonation, and so the tsunami would have ran through it and out the other side. You can see that one of those tanks down there don't belong where it's to. And you can see these tanks where they're actually twisted from the pressure of the ocean. It could collapse it, right? The atmospheric pressures of being underwater caused it to collapse. And it collapsed at the weakest point of that particular welding. Is unbelievable, right? Because if you take a styrofoam cup down in the ocean, right, it'll compress. When you come back up, it'll still be compressed. And that's what you're seeing there. So up there is reactor 5 and 6. But just so you can see the power of this creature, and you see those drums there, one is completely displaced. It's the fuel cast storage facility. We don't got much documentation on the fuel cast storage facility. You can see reactor 5 in the pump house, but reactor 6 in the pump house is redacted. Right, it's redacted. So there's a lot of damage over in that area, obviously. It was 680 kilometers of coastline. So the infrastructure and all nuclear power plants need external power supply. They usually got minimum of 2 external plants that are dedicated to the nuclear site. And they're coal, oil, and gas. Usually coal, because coal is the cheapest. And so calling them carbon-free is ludicrous. So not only do they got the pump house redacted, the building redacted completely, hard redactions, right? The whole, you see the redactions of that? Complete redaction. And also the stack, where they pump radiation emissions up those particular stacks. Like the big ones are the cooling pond emissions. And, from the boiling water or two. But those stacks are pumping from the fuel pools at the top of the building, goes up those stacks. But any other emissions, like when it burps, which is like they have these issues, and it's just the design of the reactor. They do this thing called burping because they're supposed to be the reactor's supposed to be contained, but it's not really 100% contained. It's able to burp out extra pressure. I mean, it's going to be highly contaminated. That's unbelievably contaminated stuff we're talking about. Like trillions of atoms per liter of fission. So reactor 5 and 6, so you had reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 are melted down for sure. The reactor cores you had, because when they were changing fuel in reactor 4, they don't take all the fuel out. So that's gone, because we've seen the evidence of that earlier. I showed you the destroyed actual physical reactor itself. So then you got 2 fuel pools at the top of each of those buildings, which is, say, 10 million pounds at the top of both buildings, minimum, because there's decades of reactor cores and they don't have a repository in Japan anywhere. So the reactor's 1.6 million pounds. Then you have the common spent fuel pool, which we know is 10 million pounds that they emit to, but because there's no repository anywhere in Japan, then they would have had all the extra. So think of 20 million pounds in that building. Then you have reactor 5 and 6. We have reactor 6 completely redacted and all surrounding areas redacted, but not leading up to it. Which you like, and we have the evidence suggesting that these reactors, buildings themselves, were emitting huge radiation numbers, which makes sense because they had no power. If you got no power, they melt down. They say they were shut down for maintenance, but even then you don't take all the fuel out of the reactor core. And so reactor 5 or 6. So you have reactor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and the common spent fuel pool melting down. Then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 minimum fuel pools, double in each building, melted down, detonated, blew up, caught fire, blew up, caught fire, and blew up, and melted down and lost all of their inventories. You have heat signatures right after it showing complete meltdowns at all reactors. Look at number 2, how hot that building is. We have absurd amount of literature on this stuff on top of that. Let's bring in some more pictures. Now, this is after pictures, I'm assuming, of reactor 5 and 6. This is reactor 5, that's reactor 6 over there. We have the original footage coming out is grainy when you zoom in on it. Not all of it, right? This is early releases. And so it's really, well, when you look at the tsunami coming through the site, so they brought in the world's largest pump truck. This is usually for cement, to pump water on top of reactor 4. Now, the fuel pools were at the very top of the building. That's why they need the world's longest truck, because these were 190-foot tall buildings. And so there is pictures of them pumping water in the side of the building, but that was show and tell because you can see the reactor is destroyed. You can't get near that because that's lethal doses. So this was trying to convince you that they had it all under control. The reactors need 4,500 tons a minute. These hoses from the fire trucks can spray 300 tons a day. Hence, you always hear the word in the media start claiming that there's 300 tons of water leaking out of the plant each day, and that the rest of it is going into the tanks, or is being filtered and being re-sprayed back on the melted reactors. This is 100% fantasy. This is 100% lies. And so when you zoom in, you start realizing that all of these reactors, and I'm zoomed in on this shot, that all these reactors are redacted. Now, that's not something we've seen in 10 years. We've never seen anything like that before. It's an abnormality on a large scale because nobody else is talking about it. And these were all shot from a drone. It's the most bizarre thing conceivable when you spend 10 years studying this story and these pictures and everything else. And then all of a sudden, so this is after they released these pictures. This had to be shortly after. And look at the emissions, is why I'm saying that. This is reactor 3, it's between reactor 2 and reactor 4. This was a mixed oxide facility. What that means is they were reclaiming uranium, plutonium from nuclear missiles and used fuel, which is illegal in North America, by the way. France does it. The scum degenerates at La Hague have been doing it. And also at Sellafield, which used to be named Windscale, actually had a mixed oxide fuel nuclear meltdown also. And even today, in England, in the United Kingdom, in Sellafield, which is surrounded by farms, there's 8 million liters a day hemorrhaging into the ocean. And when it melted down, it was called Windscale. They changed the name after to hide what they'd done. They went out to the theater with buses and kidnapped the back 2 rows of the theaters. Because that's back in those days, 1950s, that's where the poor people sat, was the back rows, if they were lucky enough to get a seat at all. And there was no nuclear power plant volunteers went to Sellafield. They didn't call in the military. They didn't call the fire department. They sent in people they kidnapped from the back rows. And even today, 70 years later, it's still hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean. Of like Fukushima built the tanks to trick you into thinking they didn't kill the Pacific Ocean in the future. That's what that was all about. Yeah, Japan's had a couple of hundred earthquakes in the last couple of weeks. And so the speculation, some of these were up by the biggest volcanoes they got down there. And so the speculation that a big one is on the way, but they're denying it. Of course, that's what they've always done. You can't predict earthquakes. But if you are going to try to predict earthquakes, 200 in less than a couple of weeks should make you curious. My goodness, right? There's a lot of earthquakes. And so these pictures are not redacted. And so why did they release the redacted pictures in 2000? Because they'd never done that before. Because shouldn't that be cause of controversy or a conversation? The media didn't report on it, of course, because you might go back and say, wait a second, they're pretending they're in a building that don't even exist, which is what they done, right? They pretended they were in that building in reactor 4. We got lots of detailed pictures after. So why did they redact the pictures early? Again, you can see tanks in places where they don't belong, giving you cement evidence of how much water ran through that site. It's a huge amount of water. Yeah, and that's reactor 6 right here, and that's reactor 5 up there, I think. Yeah. We'll go back and do that again. So reactor 6 totally blacked out, square on the roof, and square on the roof of the rectangle on the roof of the pump house. And the redaction extends past the seaside of the pump house, and it's just up. These are huge buildings. Heading back across the lot towards... Now, these are zoomed in because the original pictures... So that's reactor 1 coming into focus. And this side of... or this side here we're onto of the reactors, you can see everything is redacted. It's just startling, isn't it? These are huge, massive nuclear meltdowns that are now confirmed to be responsible for killing the Pacific Ocean. We have thousands of whales in the last decade washing up all over the place, not just the Pacific. And we have broken the food chain irrevocably. There is no spinning back the clock. We do research expeditions. What we found was extinction events everywhere we went, and this year, no spiders in the woods. And I was reporting on that from research expeditions live from ground zero, 450 kilometers away this year. We'll be doing it again next year. And they took down my main YouTube channel. That was just a couple of months ago. Really something. No explanations, no strikes, no emails. And then they released all these redacted pictures. Now my other site had 1,600 videos on it. All the research expeditions, everything was on that site. And I was a partner for almost 10 years with YouTube. And then last year they took that away. No excuses, they just took it away. And I was a partner with YouTube before Google bought it. So all these redacted pictures could only mean one thing. We're in a lot of trouble, and we better get after it. We better start having a conversation. At what point do you want to have a conversation? Right? If this was John F. Kennedy and they released 736 pictures and they were all redacted, there'd be a lot of conversations going on tomorrow morning, I bet you. But I'm releasing and showing you these videos. These pictures are not on the internet. You won't find them anywhere but that Chinese site. And currently don't have the link for you. The last video had the link. I never thought about getting it there tonight, unfortunately. So you see all these redacted pictures. But they released the pictures. So those pieces of cement hanging off the building, if they were fixed into place, you can actually turn an SUV around on them. That's how big they are. These are 190-foot high buildings, 19-story buildings. These are huge buildings. And they were smashed. Now, at the time, the whole country was totally devastated. I get all of that. My heart goes out to them. I believe you. This is not a game. This is life and death for all species and humanity. And pretending that this is not an issue, pretending that this is somehow letting them lie and pretend they're in a building that don't exist, has no repercussions. You are sadly mistaken, right? They faked being in reactor 3. That doesn't even exist. The media worldwide done it. Arnie Gunnarsson faked that the reactor looked like that over there and not like this here. He made the assemblies for the fuel pools. Media after media claim reactor 4 doesn't look like this, but looks like that. And they even, in 2013, they took it to a whole different extreme. Because this is RT picture here. RT pretending they're inside of reactor 4. And another picture of them pretending this is reactor 4, but obviously it can't be like that inside of this building there. That's reactor 4, see? I just wonder what the hell I done with all that. Oh, it's over there, Dina. My apologies, everybody. We're almost through it. So imagine if they released 736 pictures of the moon landing and all 736 were redacted. Would you have questions? Do you think that whoever showed it to you would be the only person talking about it the next day? Because, so all of these people pretending they're in a building that don't exist, right? And I played that clip for you earlier of each of them saying they're in a building that reactor 4. And nobody worldwide, in the world's media or universities or in the academic world, asked the question of, wait a second. And so all of those people standing up there are me. I shot each video independently and then inserted it into the picture. Because that's the closest you get into the building without dropping dead. And I should have had the smoke go higher, but I screwed that up. I screwed that up. Once again, the fuel pools at the very top of the buildings, of 190-foot buildings. So whoever released the pictures were trying to warn you. But that's why the Western media didn't tell you, because they know that. That would contradict the Western or the worldwide media when they show you that picture, see? You're like, wait a second. So we are definitely in real trouble. We are in real trouble. If you don't know what trouble is when you pretend you're in a building that don't exist. That's the definition of trouble. We're in a building that don't exist.
My understanding is on top of what used to be.
I didn't mean to double click, and my apologies. Well, there you go. We got a snowstorm going to strike in the morning. It downgraded from 40 centimeters to 30 centimeters and 10 millimeters of rain, but then it's going to get 14 degrees below zero. So if you got a snowstorm with rain, and then the temperature immediately drops down to 14 below zero, that's a skating rink, I think, isn't it? And the roads, I'm not going anywhere tomorrow. The arthritis really took the good out of me today. It took me about 3 hours to get the tarp on the boat. The wind dropped down quite a lot. We're supposed to have heavy winds tomorrow on top of that. Yeah, so what I used to do was I would go to the nuclear sites where the trolls are going to be attacking me, and then I block every one of them right there so they don't end up on my site later. Man, there's so many, probably 500 over the years attacking me for showing you the documentation. So unfortunately, I do things that got to get done, and while everybody might not agree with it, I can't satisfy everybody. I wish I could. I can't. Anyway, we're at the end of the show. Hope everybody has a good night. And we'll see everybody. Hopefully tomorrow night is the last show of the week. I start my weekdays on Sunday. But anyway, I got the big trailers moved out of the way for the plow. And the boat and the other trailer is moved. And then today I got the boat wrapped up with ropes and ratchet straps to keep the tarp down. The tarp's pretty old. I need a new tarp. And so I had about 10 holes in the tarp, and all I do is I roll up till I get the hole covered, and then I put zap straps around it so it won't come apart. Anyway, I'm pretty burnt out here tonight. And it's 12:35 in the morning. It's 36 minutes after midnight we're on to. I'm super happy I got a show in tonight anyway. I didn't think I would. I was so miserable with arthritis today. Anyway, God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow night. I know I'm late tonight and nothing I can do about it. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. God bless.